A young black boy calls a billionaire and says his daughter is unconscious on the street. 10-year-old Malik knelt beside a pale girl whose breathing barely fluttered. Around them, the city pulsed with indifference. People passed by whispering, "Another overdose," or "just another junkie." But Malik didn't move. He tilted the girl's head back the way he'd once seen on TV, holding her cracked phone in trembling hands, and dialed the number glowing faintly on the shattered screen. "Dad." When Richard Callahan, one of the richest men in the country, picked up, his first words sliced through the line like cold steel. "Is this a scam?" But the boy's shaking voice carried something no scam could ever fake. And within minutes, tires screamed against the pavement. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring more stories that remind us, humanity still lives among us. Now let's begin. The late afternoon sun was sinking between glass towers, spreading gold across the restless veins of the city. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and 1,000 footsteps drummed across the sidewalks. Nobody noticed the girl at first, not really. She was just another body slumped against the edge of a busy street, skin pale, lips drained of color, hair tangled like fallen sunlight across her cheek. People walked around her like she wasn't there. A few glanced down, shook their heads, and muttered things that came from habit rather than care. Probably drugs. Another lost one. But then someone stopped. A small boy, barely 10, stood a few feet away clutching a half-empty juice box. His hoodie hung too large for his frame, sleeves rolled awkwardly over tiny hands. His shoes were scuffed, and the strap of his backpack dangled by a single stitch. He had been heading home from running an errand for his grandmother when he saw her. Something about the stillness of her body, too still, froze him in place. He hesitated. Adults had told him before, "Mind your business, Malik. The streets don't reward heroes." But something deep inside him refused to listen. He took a step closer. Then another. Kneeling beside the girl, he whispered softly, "Hey, miss? You okay?" No answer. Her chest rose, barely. Shallow, uneven. A faint rasp escaped her throat. He remembered a scene from a TV show his teacher had played once. Check if they're breathing. Tilt the head. Keep the airway open. His small hands moved clumsily but careful, guiding her chin upward. "Don't quit," he murmured, voice trembling. "Just breathe, okay?" The world moved around him. Shoes tapped by. Phones lit up faces. Conversations about dinner plans and deadlines filled the air, a symphony of everything but what mattered. 2 college students walked by, glanced once, then shrugged. "Probably high," one said. "Not our problem." Malik swallowed hard. The sting of their words burned, but he didn't move. He kept his hand near her face, watching for breath, praying she'd take one more. Then he noticed it, the cracked phone lying near her hand, screen still glowing weakly. A name flashed again and again. "Dad, 3 missed calls." He froze. The thought of calling scared him. What if they didn't believe him? What if they thought he was stealing? But nobody else was stopping. He looked at the crowd, faces turned away, eyes focused on anything but the girl dying on the concrete. He wiped his hands on his hoodie and picked up the phone. It was cold. He pressed the call button, his heart hammering so loud it drowned the city for a moment. The line rang. Then came a deep voice, firm, commanding, impatient. "Who is this?" Malik swallowed. "Sir, your daughter. She's on the street. She's not waking up." Silence. A thick, heavy silence. Then the voice cut through again, sharper, colder. "Is this some kind of trick? Do you know who you're talking to?" Malik's grip tightened on the phone. His throat stung. "I don't want anything, sir. Please just come. She needs help." People around him started muttering again. Kids setting up a scam. Probably his gang nearby waiting to jump someone. Malik's eyes stung, but he didn't let go. "Please," he whispered again. "She's not breathing right." The billionaire on the other end hesitated. His life was built around suspicion. Every day brought calls from people who wanted something. His money, his time, his trust. But this voice, it was raw. Unrehearsed. Terrified. Something in it made him pause. "Where are you?" he asked finally. Malik's voice tumbled out in one breath. The street, the store sign nearby, the corner landmark. "Stay there," the man ordered. The line went dead. Malik lowered the phone, chest rising and falling too fast. He stayed beside the girl. Still breathing. Still faint. His fingers hovered near her wrist the way he'd seen doctors do. Around them the city didn't care. Then came the sound. An engine, deep, powerful, slicing through the noise. Tires screeched as a sleek black car swerved to the curb. Heads turned. Conversations halted. Two men in dark suits jumped out first, scanning the street like hawks. Then a tall man in a tailored navy suit stepped out from the back seat. Richard Callahan. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked forward like a storm held barely in check, his sharp eyes finding the scene instantly, his daughter lying still and a stranger, a small black boy, beside her. His jaw tightened. For a moment, suspicion flared hot. "Step back," one of the guards barked. Malik lifted both hands, the phone still in one. "I didn't hurt her," he said quickly, voice cracking. "I just stayed." Richard dropped to one knee beside his daughter. The practiced detachment that ruled boardrooms vanished the second he saw her face. "Emily," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Emily, baby." Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingers. Still there but faint. "Medics are 2 minutes out," one guard reported. Richard's eyes flicked to the boy, the trembling hands, the cracked phone in his grip. "You called me?" Malik nodded. "I saw her. She wasn't breathing right. I tilted her head back, like they show on TV. The paramedics arrived then, pushing through the crowd with red bags and urgency. One knelt beside the girl, checking her airway. He looked up at Malik after a few moments. "You kept her airway open?" Malik nodded again. The medic smiled faintly. "Good work, kid. You may have saved her life." Those words froze Richard. His gaze moved between the medic and the boy, the stranger who hadn't walked away when everyone else did. As the medics lifted Emily onto the stretcher, the billionaire's mask cracked. For once, the man who commanded industry stood silent, watching his daughter being carried away, and the boy who refused to abandon her. The whispers began again. "That's Richard Callahan's kid. And that boy, he's the one who found her?" Camera phones flashed. Someone whispered, "Doesn't look like much, does he? But he saved her." Richard's eyes lingered on Malik. He wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words caught somewhere between disbelief and humility, feelings foreign to him. "Sir, we're taking her to City General," the medic said. Richard followed, his car pulling in behind the ambulance. Malik stood at the curb, watching the flashing lights fade into the distance. For a moment he thought that was it. He'd done what he could. But then one of the guards, a tall man with a sharp jaw, turned back. "Come with us," he said quietly. "Mr. Callahan wants you there." Malik blinked. "Me?" The man nodded once. "You called him. You stay." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and quiet fear. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A clock ticked too loud. Richard paced the hallway, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked like a man at war with time. His expensive watch caught the light, but he didn't glance at it once. Malik sat on a plastic chair near the wall, legs swinging nervously. His hoodie sleeves were pulled over his hands and his backpack rested on his knees. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked to the double doors the medics had disappeared through. He didn't say a word. He just waited. Nearby, 2 nurses whispered softly. "That's Callahan, right? The tech billionaire?" "Yeah." "And the boy?" "Heard he's the one who found her." Unbelievable. The world's richest man and a kid from the streets, in the same waiting room. Malik heard them. He hunched his shoulders, staring at the floor tiles. Minutes turned to an hour. Then the doors swung open. A doctor stepped out, pulling down his mask, fatigue etched in every line of his face. Richard was on him instantly. "How is she?" "She's stable," the doctor said, his tone firm. "If she hadn't been kept in recovery position before we arrived, it could have gone very differently. Whoever did that bought her precious time." Richard turned slowly. His gaze landed on Malik. The boy shrank slightly under it, unsure what to do with the weight of that look. "I just didn't want her to die alone," Malik murmured, almost whispering it to himself. Richard's chest tightened. Those words, so simple, struck harder than any boardroom truth ever had. The billionaire sat down beside the boy, both of them facing the doors where his daughter rested. For once, the powerful man had nothing to say. They sat in silence, 2 strangers from opposite worlds, tethered by the thin thread of one girl's breath. When the doors opened again, Emily was wheeled out on a rolling bed. Her eyes fluttered open weakly, finding her father first. Richard's composure shattered completely. "You're safe," he whispered, gripping her hand. His voice trembled, the sound of gratitude raw and unfiltered. Then he turned, his eyes finding Malik once more. The boy stood in the corner, fidgeting, unsure if he should leave. Richard crossed the room slowly. And then, in front of everyone, reporters, nurses, strangers, the billionaire knelt. His perfectly pressed suit creased against the floor tiles, but he didn't care. "This boy," he said, voice steady but filled with emotion, "is the reason my daughter is alive." A hush swept the room. Cameras clicked. Nurses paused. Even the doctor stopped writing on his clipboard. Malik's lips parted, but he couldn't speak. His eyes widened, unsure what to do with the attention. Richard placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You will never be forgotten," he said softly, his words carrying enough weight to outlast headlines. In that single moment, the world saw something money couldn't buy: humility. A billionaire kneeling before a boy who had nothing, except a heart big enough to save what the world ignored. And that's how a single act of courage changed a life, a family, and a man who thought he'd seen everything. The story should have ended in that hospital hallway: a rescued girl, a relieved father, and a quiet boy fading back into the city's noise. But life had other plans. By the next morning, the world knew. Someone had filmed it, the billionaire kneeling before the boy. It spread like wildfire across news feeds and headlines. "Unknown boy saves billionaire's daughter." From the streets to a hero, the story of Malik Johnson. Talk shows replayed the moment on loop. Commentators debated whether it was real compassion or a carefully timed display of PR. But those who had seen it in person, the nurses, the guards, the doctor, knew it wasn't staged. It was something rare, a moment where humanity outshone hierarchy. When Malik woke up that morning, he didn't know his name was already trending. He had fallen asleep on the small couch in his grandmother's apartment. One room, peeling paint, a fan that clicked every rotation. His backpack was still beside him, his hoodie folded neatly under his head like a pillow. He didn't expect anyone at the door. But then came a knock, firm, polite, too official to belong to the neighbors. His grandmother, cautious as always, peeked through the curtain. Outside stood a man in a dark suit and another holding a paper bag. "Who are you people?" she asked sharply. "Ma'am," said the first man, "Mr. Callahan asked us to bring this to Malik." She frowned, suspicious. "Mr. Callahan?" "Yes, ma'am. Richard Callahan." The name hung heavy in the room. Malik's heart skipped. "The man from the hospital?" The man nodded, handing over the paper bag. Inside was a neatly folded note, a brand new phone still in its box, and a card embossed with the Callahan crest. The note read simply, "For the boy who reminded me what it means to be human. R.C." His grandmother set the note down, eyes moist. "Baby, what did you do?" Malik shrugged. "I didn't do anything special, Nana. I just helped." She pulled him into a hug. "That's what makes it special." 2 days later, a black car parked outside their building. This time, Richard Callahan himself stepped out. He looked different from the man on magazine covers, less polished, more present. The arrogance the world had come to expect was gone, replaced by something grounded. When Malik opened the door, he froze. The billionaire's shadow filled their narrow hallway. "Hey there," Richard said softly. "Mind if I come in?" Malik nodded quickly, stepping aside. The contrast was striking, the billionaire's tailored suit brushing against chipped walls, his expensive shoes squeaking on old linoleum. But Richard didn't seem to notice. He sat on the couch, glancing around at the family photos and the small potted plant by the window. "I wanted to thank you in person," he began. "I've met world leaders who couldn't do what you did, act without hesitation." Malik shook his head. "I didn't think. I just didn't want her to be alone." Those words landed deep. Richard exhaled slowly, then smiled faintly. "Emily's asking about you, you know. She wants to meet the boy who saved her." Malik blinked. "She's awake." "She is. And she remembers your voice." The boy smiled for the first time since that day, a real, bright smile that lit up his tired eyes. When they arrived, Emily was sitting up in bed, a blanket around her shoulders, her pale hair tucked behind her ears. She looked fragile but alive, the kind of alive that felt borrowed from a miracle. Her eyes widened when Malik walked in. "You're the one," she said softly. He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to say. "Guess I just showed up at the right time." She laughed, a weak but genuine sound. "I don't think it was luck." Richard watched them, something unreadable flickering in his expression. It wasn't just gratitude, it was recognition. In Malik's calm, he saw something he'd long forgotten: empathy without agenda. Emily reached out a trembling hand. Malik hesitated, then took it carefully. "Thank you," she said, "for not walking away." He smiled shyly. "You would have done the same." She didn't answer, but her eyes said she hoped she would have. Later that evening, as Malik prepared to leave, Richard stopped him by the door. "Malik," he said, voice low, "tell me, what do you want to do when you grow up?" The boy thought for a moment. "I want to help people." maybe be a doctor. But, he kicked lightly at the floor, I don't know if I can afford all that. Richard's gaze softened. You saved my daughter's life. Let me help you shape yours. He handed the boy a white envelope. Inside was a scholarship letter, not just for school but for future studies, all expenses covered. Malik stared at it, speechless. Sir, I don't. Richard raised a hand. No arguments. You earned it. The boy's grandmother wiped tears quietly at the edge of the room. Before leaving, Richard looked at her and said, Your grandson reminded me that compassion is the rarest form of wealth. I intend to invest in it. Weeks later, when Emily was discharged, she and Malik met again, this time outside, beneath the open sky that had once watched her collapse. She told him she was in recovery, that she'd been fighting more battles than people ever saw, and that maybe meeting him wasn't an accident, maybe it was grace. Malik listened quietly. Then he said, My Nana says when you save someone it's not just their life that changes. It's yours too. Richard watched from a distance, hands in pockets, eyes soft. For years he had built empires out of numbers, deals and names. But standing there, he realized, no transaction could ever equal what one frightened, brave boy had done without asking for anything. And for the first time, the man who owned everything felt truly rich. 10 years passed. Cities changed, skylines rose higher, and fortunes shifted like sand. But some memories, the ones that change who we are, never fade. For Malik Johnson, that memory was still alive. A pale girl on the pavement, a cracked phone in his hand, and a choice that turned his life around. He was no longer the boy in the oversized hoodie. Now at 20 he stood in a crisp white coat, a stethoscope hanging around his neck. The hallway of City General Hospital, the same hospital where he'd once waited as a scared child, now echoed with his footsteps. His name tag read, Dr. Malik Johnson, resident. T had been a long road. Scholarships, late nights, jobs to support his grandmother, and through it all, quiet support from the Callahan family. Richard Callahan never missed a milestone. He funded Malik's studies, yes, but he also attended his graduation, quietly proud, never once calling it charity. When people asked Malik how he got here, he never told the full story. He just said, Someone believed in me when no one else did. But today was different. Today, fate would bring the story full circle. The ER doors swung open. Incoming trauma. Female, late 20s, head injury, pulse weak. Malik rushed forward with the team, his mind steady, his training sharp. Then he froze, just for a heartbeat. The woman on the stretcher, pale hair, faint scar above her eyebrow, was Emily Callahan. Vitals dropping, the nurse shouted. For a moment, the world blurred. Malik's hands trembled, the memory of her lying helpless on the street flashed before him. But then instinct took over. He tilted her head slightly, ensuring her airway stayed clear, the very move that had saved her once before. Get a line in, stat, he commanded. Let's stabilize her. Minutes stretched like hours. Machines beeped. The air filled with urgency and hope colliding. Then a pulse, strong. Steady, she was breathing. Malik stepped back, chest heaving, relief washing over him. A few hours later, Richard Callahan arrived, older now, gray at the temples but still commanding the air around him. When he saw Malik, realization struck instantly. You, he said, voice rough. You're her doctor. Malik smiled softly. Guess we traded places this time. Richard's eyes glistened. He looked from Malik to his daughter resting peacefully and back again. You saved her, again. Malik shook his head. She saved me first, sir. That day changed everything for me. It gave me purpose. The billionaire exhaled shakily, the weight of 10 years in a single breath. And you gave me something no money ever could, faith in people again. When Emily finally woke, the first thing she saw was Malik sitting by her bed, reading her chart. Déjà vu, she whispered weakly. He looked up, smiling. Told you I'd return the favor one day. She laughed softly. I guess we're even now. He shook his head. Not even close. She studied him, the calm confidence, the same gentle eyes she remembered. You really became a doctor. Yeah, he said. And you became the reason. Her eyes filled. I used to think that day ruined my life, she said. But maybe it started it. Later that night, Richard stood by the window of his daughter's hospital room, city lights flickering below like restless stars. Malik joined him quietly. You know, Richard said, I used to think wealth meant control, that if I had enough power I could protect the people I love. He looked toward Emily sleeping peacefully. But when she fell that day, everything I owned meant nothing. And then a 10-year-old boy showed me what real power looks like. Malik said nothing. He just listened, the same way he had listened that day outside the hospital all those years ago. Richard turned to him, emotion raw in his eyes. You gave me back my daughter once. You gave me hope again today. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to carry a burden alone. Malik smiled faintly. You already did, sir. Months later, the hospital board held a small ceremony. They called it the Circle of Compassion Award. Reporters filled the lobby again, but this time the story wasn't about a billionaire or a viral video. It was about a doctor who once was a boy no one noticed, and how one act of courage became the heartbeat of two lives intertwined. When Malik walked on stage to receive the award, he didn't speak about heroism or fame. He said only one thing. When you see someone who needs help, don't wait for someone richer, smarter, or stronger to step in. Sometimes doing something small, like picking up a phone, can change the world for someone else. The crowd rose to its feet. Among them stood Richard and Emily Callahan, applauding through tears. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the city skyline, Malik visited the quiet stretch of sidewalk where it all began. The concrete still bore faint cracks, the same corner shop still blinked its neon sign. But now, a small bronze plaque was fixed to the wall nearby. Read, in honor of the courage of one boy who chose compassion when the world chose indifference. City General Foundation. Malik ran his fingers over the engraving, then looked up at the skyline glowing above. Somewhere behind those windows, people were still hurrying home, still passing strangers without a glance. But maybe, just maybe, one of them would stop, the way he once did. He smiled. Because sometimes one act of kindness doesn't just save a life, it starts a legacy.